Hello, interwebs, and welcome to the very first episode of Conspiracy Synergy, a show created by me, your host, T. Snyder, to help you enter the rabbit hole and the alternative media landscape of conspiracy without getting lost in all of the really terrible garbage conspiracies that are out there, or feeling overwhelmed by the fact that the mainstream media has done a pretty freaking terrible job for our entire lives. Let's not get too depressed about that. We'll just keep the ball rolling. But yeah, no, like, don't get me wrong on that idea. Not everything about the mainstream media has been bad, and not everyone who has worked for it or in it is bad. It's not that simple, and it doesn't work that way. But the mainstream narrative of history, as presented by the mainstream media, yeah, that's been mishandled, mismanaged, propagandized, left unquestioned, or has been outright lied about for so long now that we deserve better. Moving forward into the future, we deserve better from news media. It's time to ditch the conventional model of mainstream media and open up capillary alternatives of we the people disseminating information freely amongst ourselves. On that note, the news is supposed to disseminate relevant information that is truthful, verified, and in touch with reality. But the mainstream news hasn't been doing that, which you would think is odd because they have the internet too, right? Like, the answers are out there, the truth is out there, and it isn't as hard to find as you may have thought. In fact, a lot of the time, it's right under your nose. So in the age of the internet, all you really have to do is know which questions to ask, do a little bit of digging, and then find the answers. That's it. You verify what you find, corroborate that research with other people. That's it. Source documents, verify them, share with others, corroborate it, receive feedback, edit, and refine your hypothesis as needed. Repeat, 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 and presto. Truth. That's what truth is. What actually happened. That's what we're talking about when we enter the rabbit hole and chart conspiratorial realms. By the way, we're trying to understand what actually happened, as in what the fuck is going on under the surface of what we're being told. Like, what's buried that we can't see? What's hidden that we're not supposed to see? That's what real conspiracy research is ultimately about. And yet, if someone looks deeply into conspiracy, they are often treated by the mainstream as if they're foolish. Why? It's just people asking questions, investigating thoroughly with open minds enough to actually find real world conspirators. Like holding corrupt, powerful assholes that all got together and made sinister plans accountable for their egregious, corrupt bullshit. Finding corrupt people who got together and made evil plans. That's what conspiracy research is. And in order to do that successfully, I'd say it's pretty fucking important to look outside of the purview of billionaire media institutions that are lying to us all of the time. I mean, so conspiracy is not a dirty word. If it involves digging through a lot of dirt to find, exhume, and understand, yes. But if you really think about it, that's the most fundamental part of what real journalism is. Conspiracy research is, in point of fact, cutting-edge journalism in the contemporary era. So bear that in mind moving forward. This isn't going to be conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact. I've got a citation to accompany every notation listed in the show notes below. Please, I encourage you to get digging into the broader picture of every individual part I mentioned. This shit'll blow your mind. It's crazy. You'll love it. I swear. Okay. Later. But watch right now. Okay. So the material we'll be covering on this show is wide-ranging, sometimes hard-hitting, but always relevant. The alternative media has been doing the reporting, critical analysis, combing through history, and freeing of the mind that people have been looking for to help you discern fact from fiction, and they've been doing it for a very long time with increasing efficacy. Now, bearing that in mind, what do I mean when I say the alt media? Well, again, oh man, wow, there is a lot. There's so much shit out there. But That stuff is not what I'm talking about. Instead, what this episode will be focusing on is the best of the best. The people who have been doing the most professional work for the longest time and have the citations and resources well excavated to help expedite your trip down the rabbit hole so that you can get digging in the right directions. Oh my God, please. Just, there's so much crap out there. Just stay away from that stuff. So the theme of today's episode is Welcome to the Rabbit Hole. I'm mainly going to do two things on today's episode. I'll discuss the paradigm shift that's happening all over the world away from the old conventional model of the mainstream news industry, and I'll give you the resources and references you need to establish multiple relevant entry points into the rabbit hole of conspiracy. So first of all, let's talk about the paradigm shift that's currently happening as the old centralized models of news media die off and the new models of decentralized, peer-to-peer, open source information sharing takes over. That's the future. And that's where we're headed. So you may be asking yourself, what's the difference between the mainstream media and the alternative media? The answer, in its simplest form, has to do with organizational structure and how media is financed. Those are the two big differences between mainstream and alternative media. The mainstream media is centralized and is largely owned by private interests. What that means is that it's groups of people pooled together, working together under one ideological umbrella or corporate mandate, kind of like living in a pyramid, a bottle, or a bubble. Mainstream media exists in bubbles because that's how the organizational structure of news reporting, gathering, and dissemination has conventionally worked throughout history. Now, those bubbles could be a small group of 10 reporters working together in one corporation, or it could be a huge industry that spans the globe, totaling in the thousands of employees and tens of thousands of employees through subsidiary corporations. The mainstream media is the idea that if you get people working together in bureaucratic, hierarchical, centralized, pooled, Goliath for-profit institutions or really, 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 really large bubbles, then that's supposedly the most effective way to gather, report on, and disseminate news. Now, that's not true, by the way. The mainstream media is actually one of the least effective models there is. Here, I'll explain what I mean. It's grossly ineffective, not because the people working within the mainstream media are necessarily ineffective as individuals. Hell, some of them. A few rare individuals are so extraordinary at what they do. They're amazing individuals, still managing to do real reporting within the mainstream all over the world. But the deeper problem that even those people have is the organizational structure that everyone inside of the mainstream media exists inside of. That's the poison pill. It attempts to restrict or control the flow of information so that a profit can be made from information. And countless competent people are trapped working inside of those bubbles, trying to keep news from flowing freely so that they can cash in on its exchange. And because they're trapped inside of bubbles, so too are the people who rely on mainstream institutions to get their news. It's a serious problem. And that's why every single day, people lose more and more faith in the outdated, centralized, old world model of the news media industry. It just doesn't work very well. It's pretty freaking broke, man. It's arguably completely owned by billionaires at this point, and I'm sorry, but Epstein didn't fucking kill himself, so maybe the media is in on it, at least a little bit. Come on. You see, it's the very paradigm of thought itself that needs to evolve. It isn't as simple as founding a new, snazzy corporate media outlet to distribute the news. No, fuck that shit. No. Instead, it's the very framework of institutional organizational structuring itself that needs to be systematically dismantled and evolved in order to allow information to flow more freely, rather than be owned and disseminated according to institutional mandates. We need to pop the bubbles we all grew up in. Take apart the pyramid schemes we blindly trusted and instead replace them with many autonomous individuals. Not centralized bubble bureaucracies within bubble bureaucracies within bubble bureaucracies. Oh, God. Okay. No, not anymore. The future is about individuals working together outside of mainstream bubbles, not replacing or becoming the mainstream ourselves. No. No. That's the same thing. But instead, we envelop channels of information so completely and so thoroughly as to disable the ability to bottleneck relevant information by anyone in a bottle anywhere without everyone knowing that that's exactly what's going on. In other words, it's individuals working for themselves as individuals, not groups of individuals working together in a massive bubble, but rather individual, very tiny nodes, often individual people themselves, all going in their own directions because they're all uniquely able to bring a unique perspective to the table. Now, you may be thinking, how is that better? Don't people work best in large groups and accomplish incredible things when they're working together? Absolutely, yes. But if the organizational structure or the environment in which people work doesn't allow them the freedom to explore and investigate as they wish, then it doesn't enhance news. Instead, it has the opposite effect. It hinders news by making it partisan, glaringly biased, corporately sponsored, excessively censored, or outright propaganda from the ground up. Like, come on. It is these underlying phenomena that keep people and information bottled up by mainstream institutions. The old world institutional structuring of news media, it kept individuals from wandering outside of the boundaries they worked in. The jobs of journalists, they were owned by the financial interests of the companies they worked for. The alternative media doesn't have that problem, or at least you can verify where someone's funding comes from. All right? I mean, the alt media, a lot of the time they're pretty open about their finances and what that is. So it's individuals working for themselves who are only funded based on the merits of their individual work. And at the same time, those individuals make a point of listening to the work that other individuals are doing that manifests in completely different ways than they had previously imagined. That way, independent, decentralized investigators can both veer off in their own directions and know and understand where other people are coming from as they do the same investigations themselves in their own unique ways. You cover more ground outside of the bubbles. And that's very important when it comes to information gathering and open source analysis of so much information. The old model wasn't good enough to tackle the immensely complicated tapestry of information spread out across history. But the new model, the alternative media, the realms of conspiratorial research, digging into the rabbit hole via open source journalism, that is a completely different world. That's the real revolution that's happening in news media right now. So in point of fact, the news isn't dying at all. Instead, the news industry, as in the industry that exists solely to make money off of spinning information, that's what's dying. By no longer being bottled up, we can finally move into the real world, explore how deep the rabbit hole really goes, and maybe with all of our digging, maybe we can excavate the truth, right? So, in future episodes of this show, we'll do an emotional analysis of and contemporary reflection on revolution. Examine how we think and feel about revolution as revolutionaries ourselves. How we think and feel about storytelling, mythology, hard factuality, and beyond. This episode is designed to introduce you to the rabbit hole, but future shows in this series will help you understand how complicated and emotionally difficult it can be to free your mind, to create and sustain real change in real ways in the real world. This is Conspiracy Synergy. Welcome to the rabbit hole. Let's dig in. On the second half of today's episode, I'm going to give credit where it's due and provide you a list of some of the best independent content creators, whistleblowers, and wonderful human beings working tirelessly, busting their ass to help inform you about the truth all over this earth. Now, these people are doing extraordinary, invaluable work, and cumulatively between them, spawning from each of their individual efforts are the incredible insights that you've been in search of that the mainstream media has done everything in its power to keep you from seeing. Till now. Number 1, James Corbett of the Corbett Report. My man. This motherfucker. This brilliant ass, stone cold intellectual, soft spoken, hard hitting, huge hearted lion of a man speaks to you as always from the sunny climes of Western Japan. His work is wide spanning, thoroughly researched, compellingly presented, and is in many ways that which has set the standard for the alternative media on the whole. If you really want to understand conspiracy and the targeted manipulation of your psyche by the establishment, I wholeheartedly recommend you watch everything James produces. I'll give you a few notations, like to start you off down that path in the show notes below, but that said, it's important to understand that you're entering into an alternative purview of history itself. Okay? Like, this isn't as simple as taking a quick glance, gauging how you feel, and then not bothering to really look into the material. No, it does not work that way. Like, you have to take the time to delve into these subjects. And James Corbett of the Corbett Report has been a tremendous leap forward for all of us in our comprehensive grasp of interconnected institutional corruption throughout history. Watch and support his work now. Oh, also, because James's work is so broad spanning, like, you can discover countless other researchers, activists, and truth seekers through his network of interviews, documentaries, and through the forums of conversation on his website. Because of that, James takes number 1 not simply because of the work he does, but also because of how he's able to introduce people all over the spectrum of the alternative media community to one another's works and insights, regardless of whether or not they agree with one another politically, because we're talking about truth here, not politics. And that matters. Also, shameless plug, even some of my work has been featured on James's show. So, number 2 is Richard Grove from tragedyandhope.com. It's like, oh my god, it's basically a tie between number 1 and number 2. They're both incredible. Sorry, Rich. Sorry. Hey, Rich. How's it going? Yeah, you're number 2. It's nothing personal. I believe in you. You'll take number 1 someday. Or, one of like your students at autonomy will snatch it right out from under your nose. But not likely. Rich is pretty great. Like, he's very knowledgeable, hardworking, open-minded, and he's been a pillar of research and revelation for a long time now. He's a whistleblower turned forensic historian who long ago, when he was still working on Wall Street, discovered a back door in the software he was selling out of his then office in the World Trade Center. He discovered that the software had been designed in a way that allowed for millions of dollars to be illegally funneled through a back door built into the program without abiding federal laws set up to prohibit those sorts of practices. So when Rich discovered this, he told his superiors in the company. Those superiors not only knew about the back door that Rich had discovered, but they advised him to stay quiet about it. He decided to speak out, blow the whistle, and found himself in a rather remarkable situation that unfolded over the next few years as a result. See, he thought, as many of us once thought, that the bells and whistles of the establishment were put there as checks and balances so that things couldn't possibly become completely corrupted, right? Oh, God. What he later realized was that those bells and whistles were there to alert the establishment of any threat to its inner workings or deeply held corrupt mechanics. Like, in essence, despite the superficial veneer to the contrary, in reality, whistleblowers are hung out to dry. They're not protected. That's one of the biggest lies. And everyone out there who believes that the establishment is there to protect you as you work to hold the establishment accountable and keep it honest, well, I hate to break it to you, but it's actually the other way around. Whistleblowers are threats to the establishment, and many protections, protections that are quote unquote assured or offered to them, can often be tricks to lure them out of hiding and sometimes even penalize them for speaking out. Now I'm simplifying, oh my god, and generalizing Richard's story here a lot, but a basic analogy to illustrate the level of corruption that Richard glimpsed is this. The day of 9/11, a meeting was set between Rich, his boss, and some of those people in the company that Richard had spoken to about the illegal backdoor and the software that they had been selling. Richard was late for the meeting that day. All of the other people attended on time with the exception of his boss, who took the call from home. Everyone in the meeting room died that day when the Twin Towers were attacked. But not his boss, who told him to stay silent. He was safe and sound at home. And if you look into some of the more well-connected people who were absent from where they were supposed to be that day, if you look into the interconnected network of fraud and corruption surrounding just about every financial institution tied to the money of 9/11, Richard's story is only a tiny fraction of the larger whole. Corruption is at the heart of Wall Street, and Richard decided to become a whistleblower, thinking he would be protected under law. Richard's lawsuit, in which he represented himself, and what he had uncovered, subsequently unfolded over the course of the next 6 years. However, much to his dismay, not necessarily his surprise at that point, because he'd been doing his homework. The case was ultimately dismissed on a technicality. He didn't lose his case. He would have won. That's why they had to throw the case out. He proved how corrupt everything is, and so they had to dismiss the case. That's how bad this shit is. They literally can't even admit how bad it is, because then everyone would actually have like a court case to represent the whole fuck. But no, they can throw it out. It's like it doesn't exist, right? So that example of corruption stemming all the way from the software being sold, to the people selling it, to the laws that were passed, to the courts that represented the issue, to the posturing of financial institutions and the government itself, gives a perfect contextual framework of understanding for what we're up against here. It's not that all of these individual people, nodes, and businesses are collectively unified in it together, and whatever the hell people think conspiracy is. No, although, again, on a certain level, yeah, that happens. But generally speaking, conspiracy is more just like people who are just like, I'm doing my job, that's more of what it's like. Yeah, and so that creates sort of an environment where people aren't all corrupt, but they're all corrupt individually to some degree. Okay, now, it's depressing, but show notes, Okay, now, that roughly describes Rich's introduction to just how rigged the system is. From there, he decided to found a research community named after a book written by a famous historian, Carol Quigley. Now, that book, named Tragedy and Hope, is an accurate historical account of how evil and sinister the Council on Foreign Relations is, along with, well, pretty much everyone else who pulls the strings of how the world actually works. If you're just dipping your toes into the conspiratorial realm now, you may not have heard of the CFR, but not to overstate things. They're basically responsible for subverting American democracy and pulling the strings of every president who's been in office for the last 100 or so years. Not literally. I mean, it's way more complicated, but seriously, it's pretty much, it's kind of like that, yeah. Watch the show notes, guys, please. This shit goes deep. I mean, oh my god, I'm simplifying it here. You really got to dig in. Anyway, in other words, the CFR are some of the power brokers, behind the scenes. And the book Tragedy and Hope meticulously and exhaustively details both the CFR's inner workings, origins from the will and testament of Cecil Rhodes, and what they're ultimately working towards: global government and the abolishment of individual freedom. Why are they working towards that? Actually, if you think about it, monarchies and different classes and breeds of people have been working towards that same end for all of history. It's actually just more or less a continuation of that if you go far enough back. So yeah, that's sort of just how it rolls. If you get into a certain denomination of power, it's like you go fucking nuts, and it's like, oh, I can rule the world. It's like Pinky in the Brain. I don't know why it's like that. I'm not fucking power crazy, but shit goes down like that. Always has, so still is. Don't be surprised. Anyway, the book Tragedy and Hope. That's the book Tragedy and Hope. The website that Rich runs is a deep dive research community of the same name, featuring extensive interview series, lectures, debates, and podcasts that give you a visceral rush of mind-blowing perspective on how this shit actually fucking works under the surface. Support and watch Richard Grove's work by the Tragedy and Hope research community as soon as you can. Also, his wife Lisa helps out with the community a lot too, and they're both wonderful and talented people. All right, now you already have a few hundred hours of information and research to review. Seriously, just from those first two notations in the associative network of research, you already have the keys to so much of what's going on under the surface. But there's a whole other side to the equation that is often left out of people's consideration when in pursuit of truth. Spirituality. I'm not talking about religion here. I'm not going there. I'm not preaching any unsubstantiated dogmatic claims that churches or institutions make over people's souls, thoughts, or lives. No. I am instead referring to a wealth of esoteric wisdom juxtaposed with the contemporary political climate so as to bring about a deeper understanding of the coalescent whole of our perceptual reality itself. Wait, what the fuck did I even just say? Well, basically, number 3 on the list isn't just trying to open your eyes about how fucking brutally corrupt everything is. He's also trying to encourage you to understand the very framework upon which reality itself is based and why. Why? That's a deep dive into consciousness itself, including all aspects of this world that stem from consciousness. So, basically everything. But he does an extraordinary job. However, well, Mark, sorry, I love you. You're amazing. But for people who are just getting introduced to this, I'll put it bluntly so that you can kind of prepare yourself for this one. He comes across in a social capacity as if he's an unfathomable motherfucking asshole. He's not. Can feel like that sometimes, but no. He's a huge-hearted, hard-working, well-researched man who has composed an extraordinary wealth of information for you to take in. But he doesn't sugarcoat anything. And as he says himself, like, he doesn't feel as if he needs to, He is only here to tell the truth the way it is to those people who are thick-skinned enough to hear it straight, like, whew. That, by the way, can be really, really, really hard to handle sometimes. Like, to just be straight up bitch slapped with a very harsh reality. The truth is intense, man. And Passio brings that intensity to you straight in the gut. You need to check out number 3 on my list. Mark Passio at whatonearthishappening.com. And while we're on that subject, both I and Mark would strongly recommend beginning to listen to the information he presents from podcast number 1. Don't start with the new stuff and assume you're all caught up. Mark did a really incredible job of laying out a tapestry of interconnected nuance and then building an explanatory framework out of that wealth from day one. Whatonearthishappening.com is very different than the Corbett Report or Tragedy and Hope. And it's different because it's a study course. It starts from a very long time ago, and incrementally it reveals a greater tapestry of understanding built, not unlike the tarot deck, out of individual cards that, when placed next to one another, reveal greater pictures that compile something beyond the scope of what you might have realized just looking at it on the surface. It's like a book. And to really understand that, you need to start from the start. All right, now I'm going to go through a couple more names here really quickly to give you an even more well-rounded depth of information to dive into. Number 4 is Luke Rutkowski, along with the many other wonderful people who have rallied under the concept that is we are change. Luke is a longtime boots-on-the-ground investigative journalist who goes all around the world covering the stories that the mainstream news neglects. He directly confronts government shills, corrupt officials, and all-around evil motherfuckers on the highest levels to their faces, films those confrontations. But even with that kind of badass and big balls, he's still a cute, cuddly, warm and fuzzy, wonderful human being who's an absolute delight to watch. So I strongly recommend you check out We Are Change and look into the many times that Luke has been there to get the interview, pose the question, or catch a fleeting moment's honesty on film. Number 5 is just going to be me, saying a whole bunch of names. There are so many extraordinary, hardworking people to try and get the general public to wake up in all walks of life. And it's fucking impossible for me to mention all the people who need to be mentioned. So I've got a list here. I'm going to try and bust out some names for you. It's also in the show notes, so every different person you're going to be able to find. But it's so many names that I'm going to leave people out. I apologize to those extraordinary people I'm leaving out here. It's like a golden dildo acceptance speech, It's a time limit, and I've probably already seen your work. There are a lot of names, All right, anyway, here are some additional people to check out to really sink your teeth into the vast, expansive depths of all that the mainstream media has desperately been trying to cover up or dissuade you from looking into. Okay, so here we go. In no particular order, this isn't in order or anything, the long list of names for number 5 slot are Whitney Webb, Joe Plummer, Jason Burmis, Patrick Wood, Derek Brose, Larkin Rose, Dan Dix at Press for Truth, James Evan Pilato at Media Monarchy, The Free State Project, which, it isn't a person, it's a project, but still, check it out. Richard Gage, and everyone involved with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, whistleblower John Cruz, Keith Knight, Brock West, Del Bigtree, Catherine Austin bits of the Solari report. Like, oh man, oh, she's so good. Like, like $21 trillion is missing. Wake the fuck up, people. You're being ruled by criminal I'm sorry. I'm getting lost loving all of you here. Ross and Lynn Ulbrich. It's kind of a segue, but free Ross now. Michael Parker. John Rappaport. Cal Washington. Vanessa Beeley and Ava Bartlett. Abby Martin. Kevin Cole. Kevin, you're fucking amazing. G. Edward Griffin, Randall Carlson, Dean Radin. Oh my god. If you want to get into like legit Six Sigma result, paranormal research, Dean fucking Radin, people. I mean, real magic. I know it sounds crazy, right? Just fucking read it. Just read it. Okay, back to the list. Vinny Eastwood, the late John Taylor Gatto. I mean, like, you see what I mean here? There are too many names and too many extraordinary people, because that's the level of conversation that's really taking place far, far away from the airwaves of the mainstream media. And that conversation isn't allowed on the mainstream whatsoever, other than to demonize it. That's it. Anytime this stuff gets discussed, it's like a very simple version of it that keeps people from understanding it, makes them angry about it, and then if you approach them with more facts, they're just like, no, I heard a simple version that's angering, and I'm not going to confront that information. And you're all like, oh man, this is difficult. So, but, yeah, you get over it. Slowly and surely, as you know your shit and you learn your shit, and you're just like, oh damn, whoa, this is sort of just an emotional defense that people are having, and we got to overcome that, and then we can all just be like, hey, now we know what's up. So bear that in mind, you know? And that's what these people have been doing. That's what these people are on the forefront of. They're the alternative media out there who have already done the landwork so that the facts are much easier to find. Number 6 isn't a person. It's a concept. The concept at the heart of the alternative media is the rabbit hole itself, and any rabbit inclined to help dig. That means your individual curiosity, your individual perspective, and your individual talents. See, the thing about the rabbit hole is the more rabbits you have digging, the more thoroughly you're able to excavate the truth for everyone. Yes, a lot of dirt gets kicked up in the process, and not everyone is moving in the right direction. That happens with people no matter what. There will always be those who are better at what they're doing, and there will always be those who get lost in the search for truth. But the idea is to encourage the expansion of the alternative media. It's about getting as many individual people exploring information, sharing that information with one another, and then veering out in all sorts of wildly different directions. And as a result of all of that, more deeply informing ourselves and one another about the truth, about what actually happened. So number 6 on the list is you. You have the power to investigate, to delve into history, to explore controversy, and to share that with the rest of the world so that they can get involved, helping to find, discern, and spread real, genuine truth too. Entering the rabbit hole is as much about informing ourselves as it is collectively terraforming the pre-existing construct of what we have been taught to regard as normal. We have the power to change what normal is. That means we have the power to change how we view history itself. If we dare to review history itself, you know, like each of us in our own unique ways, exploring the rabbit hole together and whatever subjects we find interesting as individuals. You know, it's an incredible transition in information that's taking place right now. And to those in the mainstream, it feels like chaotic, borderline insane. To those of us in the alt media who like have done our research already, this feels more liberating and long overdue. The truth isn't out there anymore. It's right in front of us waiting to be revealed. So that's it for the first episode of Conspiracy Synergy. One last note, something that's original that I'm going to be doing with every episode of Conspiracy Synergy is having a shirt designed and created by me that you can purchase to support this show. And every bit as importantly, a shirt that you could use as a tool in the real world to reach out to strangers and have much needed conversation about conspiracy. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. If you're just getting introduced to the world of alternative media, I've given you a ton of resources and profound, like, oh, this is the good shit, this is it, information on what's going on under the surface. All of the links to those notations are featured in the show notes in the description of this video, and I cannot encourage you enough to spread your wings, roll up your sleeves, and start digging. My name's Tees, Teacher of Peace. Pleasure to be on this rock with you all, and I cannot wait to see how we manage to change it for the better together. Till next time, this has been Conspiracy Synergy. Welcome to the rabbit hole. Get digging.